Good morning. Good afternoon. What time is it?
It's morning?
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
Wonderful.
I get to be with you. We got on the pink situation.
We're
I get to be with
matching.
all of you. I'm fantastic.
I'm so excited to be sitting here with you today and interviewing you, asking these questions. I would love to hear your amazing, amazing insights. I have done such extensive research on you and all of the wonderful things.
I am so sorry.
No, don't worry.
But thank you for doing that.
Of course. I had a great time. And something that I found when I was doing my research is that in one of your interviews in 2020 with Elle, you presented this call to action for intersectional feminism and acknowledged that, instead of being afraid of the word intersectional and afraid of what intersectional feminism calls us to do, we should see it as an opportunity to imagine a world that works for everyone, that fits every mold rather than what we have seen in the past. And I think from your perspective, I would love to hear how do you think that those who have always seen themselves represented within the movement can work to ensure that other historically and currently marginalized and oppressed voices are amplified and pushed forward in the movement going forward?
That's such a great question. Thank you so much for the care you've put into this conversation. Intersectionality is one of those words that scholars knew and then activists knew, and now everybody thinks they know. It's a lot of people think it has to do that it's the same or it's interchangeable with diversity, and it's not, right? We're talking, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but just to make sure we're all on the same page and working from the same definition, when Kimberly Crenshaw, a Black feminist legal scholar, coined the term, she was talking about people who have multiple marginalized identities and experience the intersection of oppressive systems at the same time in different ways. So she was talking about what it was like to be a Black woman in the legal profession, right? Because she's got the marginalized experience of a woman, the minoritized experience of a Black person, and she recognized that as a Black woman, her experience was different from white women who have racial privilege and gender oppression, right? But it's also different from, say, Asian American Pacific Islander women or indigenous women or immigrant women, right? And that all of these different intersections are not about adding up the different oppressions, but actually recognizing that at that intersection of those systems, there are multiple different oppressive experiences, and that the way that Black women are treated in the workplace can be different than the way that Asian women are treated in the workplace, can be different than the way even between East Asian and South Asian women, right? So you can keep breaking this thing down. And I think it's intimidating to a lot of people because people are like, oh my gosh, how many categories can you make? It's like, well, 1 million, right? If you really want to have the conversation, we can make a whole lot of categories. So sit down and get comfortable because we got work to do.
Right.
But what the beauty of the concept invites us to do is to think about how we build policy, and that's big P policy that they build here in Washington or in state houses, or small P policy. If you are managing a team or you run an organization or you've built a club at your school, all of those places have policies. Right? You have rules and regulations and systems and culture and traditions that you hold to, and you want to make sure that all of those things are built with everybody in mind. And the trick of intersectionality is that if you build your policies for the people who have the least amount of privilege in the room, then the beautiful thing is that actually everybody benefits. So instead of being intimidated by that, we should see it as a beautiful invitation and opportunity. I think COVID has been a really powerful reminder of this. We were talking in the back with Liz about disability. There were a lot of things that benefited all of us in 2020 that the disability rights community had been fighting for literal decades, right? And if we had built policy that allowed people to work and study from home, that gave people better access to broadband internet, that actually created real accessibility suddenly when everybody needed it, if we had been doing that for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, it wouldn't have been so hard to transition in 2020.
True.
And everybody realized, these things that disabled people had been fighting for decades actually benefit all of us. And now that people think that the whole thing is over, people are going back to being like, oh, well, it's fine. We're going to go back to the way that things were. And disabled people are like, okay, all right. you're going to find out one way or the other. And I would much rather us find out about this because we finally figured it out the right way than have a bunch of people unnecessarily suffering the wrong way.
Absolutely. That was a very powerful message. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah. I think it takes a lot of courage to kind of be that person to speak up and say, you know, hey, like, we've made progress, but there's still much more progress to be made. There's many more communities that need us to make more progress. And in many instances, women who speak out against injustices such as yourself are urged to kind of grin and bear it or be grateful that they even have a seat at the table. Even if it's just one seat, just one.
Yeah.
And I mean, is simply having a seat at the table enough to bring about meaningful change? Is it, you know, how do the power dynamics that have already been in place and the lack of representation that we've seen for generations influence the effectiveness of advocates and their ability to try and push for this change?
See, this is why you're good, because you're asking the real questions. I'm all about it, Winter.
Thanks, girl.
Listen, as my good sis Angela Rye says, my ancestors built this joint for free, which means this is my table. You got a seat at my table, to be very clear, right? And
Thank you.
I had the really special privilege of doing a show on PBS called Finding Your Roots. And so there were award-winning genealogists who did the research on my family. So literally, I can tell you the names. I can tell you about Joanna and Jacob, and I can tell you about my ancestors who died in the Civil War fighting for free. Like, I know that this is my table, that every place I am, I belong. That an abundant life is my birthright. And operating in that mentality is antithetical to the system that I encounter every day, to the systems that we all encounter. These systems would much rather, as we were talking about before, would much rather us be tired, downtrodden, depressed, doubtful of ourselves, burnt out, and very simply so grateful for a seat at the table they told us was theirs that we're afraid to even speak up because we're afraid somebody's going to take the seat out from under us, right? That attitude of gratefulness that they are selling you to have is to trick you into being quiet, frankly, right? Because if you're so grateful to be here, then you're not going to shake the apple cart. You're not going to rattle things too much. You're not going to shake the table. I'm a table shaker. I don't know any other way to be. I know you're all table shakers. That's why you're in the room, right? I mean, don't shake these tables. They are set up beautifully. The flowers are lovely. But
shake the table metaphorically.
Right, shake the table metaphorically. And so I reject that idea precisely because they don't want me to. Right? And I really hope that every single one of you in this room recognizes that every place you occupy is a place where you belong, and it's our collective responsibility to make sure that if you've got a seat at the table, you kick the door open to bring in 10 more people who have perspectives that even you don't have. That if they don't give you a seat at the table, as Shirley Chisholm would say, that you bring a folding chair. And frankly, that you build a table so great, so powerful, so massive, that those folks who rejected you will be begging to have a seat at your table, and you can say, nah, this ain't the table for you.
I mean, that was beautiful. Your words are so impactful. I got the chance to speak with you a bit earlier, and just everything you said really resonated with me. And just hearing about your incredible journey and the amazing strides that you've made for not only Black women, but for women in positions of leadership. I mean, you have in advocating for racial justice, mental health, so many things. I mean, what advice would you give to this group of girls, to me, and most importantly to your younger self, for how to navigate this world for people who want to make a difference, but maybe feel like that the table isn't theirs?
Yeah. Oh gosh, these are such good questions. I would tell my younger self, and I will tell all of you now, that every single second, minute, hour, day, month, year that I spent trying to contort myself to the archetype that I was told was the right one every time I tried to fit into something that did not fit, every time I tried to maneuver my mind, my body, my spirit to occupy a space that clearly was not for me because I was feeling like a square peg in a round hole for a long time, every waking second that I spent doing that was a waste of time. Because nobody who ever changed the world fit in, right? I mean, if you really go down the list, nobody, Maya Angelou did not fit in. Michelle Obama does not fit. They still talk about that lady in her arms. She does not fit in, right? Right? Yeah. There's an ownership that I have taken years to have over myself, my life, my legacy, where I come from, what I'm made of, and who I was designed to be. And I wish that I had gotten to it when I was 19. I wish that I had gotten to it when I was you all's age. Because that conformity does not set anybody free. It won't set you free. It won't set the communities that you're working with free. And I think that I wish I had learned that earlier. What I will say, though, that I have learned since is that the superpower in being uniquely myself and striving to show up every place as myself means that when I show up as my free self, I give somebody else permission to do the same thing, right? So if we leave this room and y'all are like, she wasn't that good, but I got one person to think about.
Nobody's gonna say that.
But
literally nobody's gonna say that.
But guess what? It's okay, because I showed up here as my full self and I have no regrets, right? Absolutely. And so, but if one person walks out and says, you know what, I think I can sit up a little bit taller. I can be clear that I belong in the space that I'm in, right? If one person benefits from me being myself and feels permission to be their full selves, then like I've won the day, right? I remember running an education organization back home in St. Louis. And I was speaking to hundreds of teachers. I was the first Black woman to lead that organization in a really long time in that region. And I go up in front of the room, it's maybe about 500 people in the room to speak. And I don't remember what I was wearing that day. A couple of months later, I had lunch with one of the Black young women who was in that room. She was an assistant principal. She was moving her way up. She really cared about young people. And I thought we were going to have a conversation, about her career and the things she wanted to do next. And did I have any advice or people to connect her with? And I came totally prepared for that conversation. She started off the conversation by reminding me what I was wearing. And I was like, why do you remember that? I probably just wore it because it wasn't wrinkled. She was like, you had on this orange blazer and a matching skirt. And she was like, I had never seen a Black woman in color before, standing in front of a room full of people in charge of the organization, right? And 10 years before that, I would have thought, because I used to work on Capitol Hill, I would have thought I had to wear navy or gray or black in order to be seen as authoritative. But if I've got the job and I'm running the organization well, and we've been raising more money than we've ever raised before, and our teachers are doing better than they ever have before, we're more culturally responsive than they ever have before, I don't need to worry about what I wear to prove to you that I have authority. I have authority because of who I am. I have authority because I've gotten the outcomes. I have authority because I walk up in here with confidence, knowing what I know and knowing that I don't know everything, so I'm willing to listen, right? So why not wear an orange blazer, right? And I realized in that moment that simple choice of showing up in the way that made me feel good that day, that made me feel most like myself that day, gave her permission to do the same, right? And I had no idea that I was doing that in that moment, but it happened because I decided to show up authentically as myself. So I am begging you to learn the lesson far earlier than I did, because you will free other people when you free yourself.
Thank you so much for being willing to engage in this conversation with me. Your words, your wisdom, it is awe-inspiring. And that one person, that's me. There's probably way more though. It's definitely more than one.
Well, the feeling is very mutual. And Winter, I gotta tell you, after getting to know you over the last hour, I'm very excited to hopefully have a seat at whatever table you are building, because it's going to be a big and beautiful one. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you all so much.